My name is Alex Hayes, but people know me as Cause, and we put it in a little thing, because it looks good in titles. I am a producer, mix engineer mostly, and a vocal producer from London, and I help people make records. So how I first discovered Lynx was a friend of mine who's a great mix engineer in this country called MSM. And he mixes everybody over here, and dubs, all sorts of people. I hit him up, and because I'm trying to replace this interface that I have already, because I was having some issues with it. I needed something a bit more portable. I needed something, more up to date with a better interface on it. The thing I had sounded great, right? That wasn't actually my main thing. I was just like, I need something I can take to other studios when I got, vocal production sessions. So I said, look, let me come over and have a listen to it and just see what it's saying, see if it'll work. So I came by and we had a couple of different things, and he showed me a different manufacturer's interface first. I had a look at that. And sounded okay, sounded really good. It was a small form factor, had all the I/O I needed, whatever. But the latency was really high. Like, it had really high latency with USB interface. And that's important for me. As much as having a great clock and great conversion, it's really important that I can track natively for a number of reasons, plugins that I use, auto-tune, etc., that you can't get HDX versions of. And so I was just like, this isn't going to work. Great as it is, it's not going to work for me. So anyway, so he gives me the Hilo. I hook up the Hilo, and I was like, this sounds loads better. I could hear it immediately. I had an SM7B. I think it was going into a 1073 patched into the Hilo, and I was like, this sounds like, I didn't expect the sound to jump like that. Because, the interface we had before, it was a very well-regarded one. And I just thought, this is great. We're at 44.1, couldn't hear any latency, really. At 96, I could hear none at all. And I thought, this is the one. And that was a few years ago, and then COVID happened. I thought, I'm not going to spend any big money on studio stuff for a bit. But then, things got better, hopefully for all of us. And I got one, and I brought it here, and I had it sitting next to, I don't know if we can say the names of other manufacturers. I've got a Lavery Blue here, which is an incredible box. And it's in a comparable configuration, in terms of I/O. And again, I didn't expect it to be loads better sonically. I just thought, this is modern. The clock would probably be a bit better, and I've got a Thunderbolt 3 interface on the rear, and it's more portable, whatever. So that was my main reasoning again, and I was blown away. I couldn't believe it. I was just like, this, again, it's like the other situation. This just sounds loads better to me, and it's not, like I'm going from, a sort of prosumer level interface. I'm going from, mastering grade, high-end interface into the Hilo, and it just like it just, everything about it sounded better. And the speakers I've got here, these are the Key 3s. They've got digital input, so it's AES in. So it doesn't make sense going in analog. But even with the clock on the Hilo, it sounded loads better because the clock's more stable, I'm guessing. These sounded better with that, even though I'm not going in analog and I'm going in digital, which is incredible to me. So, it's been a great thing. Okay, so the way I use the Hilo in the studio is, so it's the Thunderbolt 3 version, as I mentioned. I recently, sort of 6 months ago, maybe a bit longer, I got an M1 MacBook Pro, M1 Max, to replace an old Mac Pro. And it's incredible the level of performance you can have on a laptop now. It sits right next to me. The fan hardly ever kicks in, and when it does, you can't hear it. Great. So I'm in a situation where I can go from having, a fixed studio machine and a portable machine, and I can have all of that in one. Great. That's my main motivation for thinking I'm going to switch interfaces to something that I can carry around a bit more, because then I can take my whole studio in a bag, drop it in Metropolis or Abbey Road or wherever I am, and keep going. So it goes in Thunderbolt 3. I use it mainly for it's just basically my junction box. It's my terminal station. Everything I'm using every port on the thing. So I've got the ADAT port, goes into an older converter I've got kicking around, which is for silly things like a aux cord for when artists come and play me stuff. So that goes into that. I've got a TC meter. I don't think it's out of shot. I've got a TC meter, so I can check LUFS, I can check frequency spectrum. That comes out the optical, so that's both the optical ports. I've got the AES out going to the keys, and then the D to A is being used here for Q, so headphone Q. And also, I've got a few other speakers that I like to test on sometimes. That's what the D to A is being used for here, and the A to D is for tracking, mainly vocals. I'm all in the box when I mix. I'm only really tracking one source at a time. I don't need loads of I/O. I'd rather have two really high quality A to D, converters for tracking vocals, rather than having 16 that I never use. So it was the perfect interface. Yeah. So when I first set the Hilo up here, and I had a vocal session like quite soon after that. Guy I worked with loads, I've cut all of his records going back sort of 10 years. He comes and, it's the usual setup. He has a preference. He likes the U87 into a 1073, into an 1176. That's his thing. And before that, it went into, my Lavery Blue. And I've been listening to that converter for 14 years. I've had that thing, right? And this was the first time I cut vocals through the Hilo. And he was like, this sounds loads different. He was just like, what's different about it? And I said, well, there's just one box that's changed. Everything else is the same. And he was just like, I sound completely different. I can hear all of this top end. That's the most obvious thing. And it changes the way I mix, and it definitely changes, the vocal quality. When it lands in Pro Tools, it's unbelievable how it sounds. And we cut that vocal, and it was just like, this is a different level now. And again, it's not something I expected, but it's crazy. It's really, obvious and noticeable, the difference. This year, I did a project with JP Cooper, who's a great sort of soul R&B artist over here in the UK. And I mixed a couple of the records on the album, but I also mixed the entirety of, we did gospel versions of every single track. And then we did like sort of guitar acoustic versions of every track as well. And that was amazing, and they recorded all of it in Abbey Road. And then another one I've done, which is a slightly lesser known artist called Merkage Dave, that I work with all the time, who incidentally is the guy I'm talking about, who came in and heard the difference with the Hilo. And he's totally self-funded artist, but it's just managed to build up a massive following. He just did a really big London show the other night that we went to. And it's a completely different ethos, because if essentially what we're doing is taking bedroom productions and making them sound like real records. So he's jumping around all around the world, going to all these different studios with all these different, some well-known, some lesser-known producers. And some of it comes to me like, quite polished and ready to go, and I'm doing minimal work. other things are really far back and I'm going way more into production. And then I'm vocal producing everything. We cut everything here. And, I'm getting performance out of him, giving him ideas. It's a very creative and collaborative, process. And, you know, the end result, we're starting to get a lot of traction, and he's gone from playing in a pub to playing, a venue with 3,000 the other day, which is amazing. One of the key advantages to the Hilo is the portability. And so I was working with like a major pop dance duo over here about 4 years ago, I think it was. And it was at a commercial studio. So I go over there and, we're working on the house machine. Now, before you do something like this, and anybody whoever does gigs in lots of different studios, especially if you're there creatively, you're there to vocal produce or whatever it is you're doing. Okay, which version of Pro Tools are you running? Which computer is it on? Does it have, if you've got an old Mac Pro 5.1, has it got a USB 3 card? Can I plug my drive in? I don't want to leave my stuff on your machine. I want it all to run onto my drive for security reasons. Which version of Pro Tools are you running? Which converters are you using? Which plugins do you have? Which versions of those plugins do you like? There's this huge checklist of things that you need to make sure are okay, and they have everything that you need before you can then go there. And I get there, after checking off all of these things, and I had 2 singers booked back to back, right? So we had 4 hours with the first artist, and then 4 hours with the second one. And she turns up with her manager. She sat there, press go, no sound. And at one point, I've got 10 guys sweating behind the desk, pulling cables out, pushing things around. After all that, I was done in because, it was so stressful in the morning getting all of that stuff together and making it happen. And I vowed I would never, ever use a house computer at a big studio again, unless it was for something like, cutting a band or an orchestra or whatever, and they're set up for that. They know what they're doing, great. But if it comes to sort of cutting vocals or tracking stuff in 1 at a time, 2 at a time, whatever, I'm going to have my own portable setup. And now I've got the M1 MacBook Pro and I've got the Hilo with Thunderbolt 3. I can chuck that in a backpack, get in a cab, go where I'm going, plonk it on the desk, patch it in within 10 minutes, and I have all my plugins. I know they're all going to work. I know they're all the right versions, and I can work as if I'm at home, and it's great. So that's one of the main advantages for me. So what got me into it was when I was a kid, I was a rapper, and I still do actually. I still make my own records. And I needed to make beats in order to do that. And I needed to learn how to record in order to be able to do that. At the school I went to, we had a little 4-track tape recorder, little Tascam thing, I think it was, and a Casio keyboard that had like a 4-track sequencer on it. And we had a little microphone, which was like one of those police things that you see stuck on the wall when they do interviews. I don't know why they had that thing, but that's what we had, right? And, you had to be, you're so limited in the equipment that you had that you had to be so creative in order to make it work. So, we don't have the ability we don't have a grid. So we're just playing stuff for like 5 minutes and then, cutting it to tape and then recording and then bouncing 3 down to 1 and then, going back and then using the other 2. So that's sort of like the humble beginnings. And, I've always just made records, and I worked with an artist called Professor Green. We grew up together. He went to the same school I did. We were making all these records. And, long story short, he had a hit record that I worked on with him. I helped produce and I did vocal production on and stuff. And I quit my job because of that. Then off we went around the world for like 5 years, made loads of other records, had a #1 hit, had, 3 top 5 albums, a number of, top 10 singles, toured the world like that. And I more and more fell away from artistry and more into production, and then sort of naturally into mixing. I just found that I loved it. I still like, making beats and programming and stuff, but I just found it like, unless it's for me as an artist, if something lands on my desk and I know what you're trying to do already, like I can hear it and I know where all the holes are at, I can fill all of those holes and I can add some things if I need to. And I know what you're trying to do, and I know what you're feeling like as an artist because I've been behind the microphone. I've helped to MD quite big live gigs before, so I sort of know how things are going to translate there, and all of that sort of helps you making choices when you're mixing, And I just found it was a sort of natural progression to there for me.